All right, well, welcome everybody. This here is Michael Schiraldi. He is a paralegal in a law firm in San Francisco and has agreed to talk to us about a little bit about what he does and his interaction with court reporters. So thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
And tell me a little bit about what your job actually is, what you do.
So a paralegal is basically an assistant to an attorney. And what we do is that we help attorneys with all the aspects of a case. At my firm, we handle personal injury civil litigation. And so I would be responsible for client contact, filings, working up the case and discovery. And as part of that, we would notice depositions, and the paralegal is usually responsible for, at least at my firm, we would handle scheduling the court reporter for depositions and trial testimony.
So before you were a paralegal, when did you first even hear about court reporters, or did you hear about them before you became a paralegal?
You know, you would see them like on Law and Order, right? Or a television show in which, you know, you got the court reporter and they're typing up everything. And so that was my limited exposure when I was younger of, oh yeah, court reporter or stenographer is someone who records all the information, all the words that a witness is saying and the questioning attorney says.
So, okay, so let me just tell you, those are mostly fake court reporters on there.
Sure.
Just so you know.
Perfect.
But okay, so now you're working in this law office, and so you have interaction with us when we, do you actually call the reporting firms and say we need it, or maybe not call, but contact the reporting firms?
Yes. So at my firm, the paralegals are responsible for contacting the court reporting agency, and we usually do that online, unless it's a rush job, and then we would call that agency. Okay,
and what makes you choose one agency over another? Because there are different court reporting agencies.
Sure. So it depends on the firm. Sometimes our firm prefers a court reporting agency from one to another, and we usually primarily use that court reporting agency in our hometown. If we're on the road, for example, if we have to do a deposition, we're in San Francisco, so if we're doing one down in LA, we may get one closer to that if we need a room or what have you. But if we're doing it at an attorney's office, we try to go with the one that we prefer.
Okay. And so now you've scheduled the deposition and the depo day comes. What time of day would you usually expect your reporter to walk in? What time before, say you set a deposition for 10 o'clock, when would you expect that reporter to be there?
It's always nice to have a court reporter show up at about 30 minutes before. That way they are allowed to get set up. And what I like to do is I like to just briefly introduce myself to the court reporter, ask them how they're doing, ask if they need anything from coffee to more specific items of documents. I always give them a caption as well because it's one of the things that they always request. And that usually helps them out and just builds a rapport that way.
Okay, so good. So the reporter should be there at least 30 minutes. I agree. I usually try to get places an hour ahead of time, always just in case there's some problem.
Sure, but you know, there's always, for someone in the Bay Area, there's always traffic. Well, there used to be always traffic. And so, a half hour is always appreciated.
Yeah, that's true. There is always, or we take this public transportation and it breaks down and so on. So,
sure.
Yeah, so aiming for that, that's good. Okay, so have you had any kind of not so good court reporter experience?
I think, I have to say for the most part, our court reporters that we've had have been very good to excellent. They usually do a great job. They pay attention to the entire deposition. We've had more difficult instances when we have a videographer in the room because sometimes a videographer can get a little absent-minded. And so will not be paying attention to each and everything going on. In my experience, we've had wonderful court reporters, and the court reporters, for the most part, have been very accommodating and very responsive, which is half the battle.
Good to hear, since I'm one of those court reporters.
Exactly. But I'm sure that you've heard the horror stories of what have you. But for the most part, the worst thing that happens is that either you have a witness who is going about 100 miles a minute, or, of course, the personal favorite, the attorneys are going at one another and stepping on one another. And how the court reporter can somehow distinguish between the two is always, that's the most challenging part.
Magic, and it's magic the way we do
Yeah,
it.
that's very true.
So you mentioned videographer. Can you explain a little bit why you might want to have a deposition with a videographer also?
Sure. So we use video. We usually videotape depositions or have them digitally recorded at this point, because at trial, under the civil rules in California, you're allowed to play trial testimony of a diverse party at any time. And so you can quickly whip up video during opening statement or during the trial and use that. And it's a very powerful device. And so you also get a sense of the witness's temperament as well as facial expressions. So that's also very helpful when preparing for trial.
Okay, so you use it mostly for trial, and then you can sync up the transcript. So when you're showing a piece of it, right, you get the actual transcript going by. If you ever do that, I'm not
Correct.
sure.
Yes.
So now the deposition's over, and the videographer takes the video. And when do you expect to get a transcript? And how do you like to receive them?
Usually, for the most part, usually 10 business days is the normal turnaround. If we need something more quickly, we try to identify that immediately, because that's what court reporters prefer. We say, hey, we need a rough or we need a rush on this. And then we try to work with the court reporter of when we can get that done. Sometimes we can say, hey, if we take it on Thursday, if we can get a final on Monday, that's great. And I know that sometimes it's much more quicker than that. It's like, I want it as soon as we can. My preference nowadays is to get everything electronic. I am not into getting more and more paper. So I'm all about electronic. And usually what happens with our court reporting agency, they upload it into a repository, or they email it directly to us.
What determines if you just want to get a rough or an expedite?
So usually that is an attorney decision. I think if there's a hearing coming up, or if there's a trial that is imminent, or we need to write the motion, that usually means we need it more quickly. When you're in the middle of discovery, you can usually say, hey, we don't need this right away. We can take the 10 business days or 14 days and get it later. But when you're up against those trial deadlines, usually that's when we need it more readily available. And usually that's when we say, hey, we need an expedite and we need it by next week or 48 hours, etc.
Great. So have you ever gotten it sounds like you've gotten some really good reporters and transcripts back. Has there ever been any transcripts that have just been horrible?
Not horrible. I mean, like as I mentioned before, the worst is when they're kind of going back and forth with the attorneys, and it's a little bit choppy. But that, I feel, is not on the court reporter itself. From my opinion, that's from just the deposition. There's nothing that the court reporter can do. And at the same time, I don't really know if it's, for the most part, the court reporting that I've seen has been exemplary. Everything is usually spelled correctly and what have you, and that's, most helpful.
Good to hear. I mean, we definitely are very, if you went to our conventions, you would laugh if you walk around and hear us talking about, no, a comma goes there. No, that's not how you use that word. No, that's what we argue about when we're all together as a big convention. So it's pretty funny. But all right, well, do you have any advice you would like to give to my students who might be interested in doing depositions, what you might look for in a good reporter?
one of the few things is that I always like to build a rapport, and I think that's critical. And I know that sometimes you go into a firm and they're difficult to work for. Hopefully, you build the best rapport though with the legal assistants and the paralegals, because we're kind of like the knowledgeable ones, and we can bridge the gap. And so I would just say to be open to a rapport with them, and and if you need anything, I think it's always helpful to ask. Always ask if you need help or assistance, or if you need something from the attorney. Be like, hey, I need a caption, or I need X, Y, Z. You shouldn't be afraid to ask that question.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It's funny that sometimes since you said that, an attorney will say, "Oh, I don't need a rough," even though it was on your order sheet. I don't need a rough. I don't need this. And okay, so we don't do it. And then next day we get the paralegal phone call. Hey,
Yeah,
I need that
know.
rough. I don't care what Mr. Jones said. Well, I'm the one in charge.
And it happens. And usually the paralegal is like, I want to just apologize because I know when we said no expedite, I actually need an expedite and we need it in 48 hours. There's a patience there. But I would say always ask a question, and always build that rapport with the assistants, because we're more than happy to help you guys out. You're with us. You're on our level, so we understand.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Well, thank you so much for coming here and talking. I will encourage anybody who watches this to post any questions you might have for Michael in the chat below, and I will definitely send them on to him, and he will answer, I'm sure. So thank you for coming on, and I will see you at the next deposition.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.